On Christmas Eve, my son raised his glass and said, "Here's to our last holiday with her." Laughter rippled through the room. Not loud. Not cruel enough to draw attention. Just soft, polite laughter, the kind people use when they don't want to question what's been said. I was sitting right there. Close enough to see the Christmas lights trembling inside his wine glass. Close enough to hear the careful pause before the toast, the way he cleared his throat like he was saying something reasonable. Necessary, even. No one looked at me. Not his wife. Not his friends. Not even my son. It's a strange thing, being erased while you're still breathing. While you're still holding a fork in your hand, still chewing, still listening. I remember thinking that if I moved too suddenly, if I reacted at all, someone might accuse me of ruining the mood. Sophie leaned toward him and whispered something. He smiled at her, the same smile he used to give me when he was a boy and wanted reassurance. I watched that smile the way you watch ice begin to crack beneath your feet. Quietly. Carefully. Because reacting only makes the fall faster. "Next year will be different," he added, softer this time. As if the walls were the only ones meant to hear it. But I heard it. At 74, my hearing is the one thing no one has tried to take from me yet. I cut a small piece of ham, though my fingers felt stiff. Across the table, my granddaughter Clara didn't laugh. Her eyes flicked toward me, wide and unsure, like she knew something she wished she didn't. I gave her a small nod. The kind that says, "Don't worry about me, darling. I've survived harsher storms than this." The Christmas tree lights flickered in the corner, cheap bulbs struggling to stay lit. I wondered briefly if my son had chosen them on purpose. Probably not. Cruelty, when practiced long enough, becomes thoughtless. They were all comfortable. Sophie passing plates. Daniel topping off glasses. Their friends chatting as though my presence was seasonal decor, something outdated but not yet removed. I looked down at my hands. They used to be strong enough to lift my husband when his knees failed him in the last months. Strong enough to scrub floors, stitch torn jackets, and cradle Daniel's fevered head when he was a child who couldn't sleep unless his cheek rested against my shoulder. Those hands weren't shaking now. I kept waiting for it, the humiliation, the heat behind my eyes, the sting. But instead, there was calm. Thin, but steady. Like the first layer of ice forming over a winter pond. Sophie's brother asked Daniel if January was still the plan. Daniel nodded too quickly and took a sip of wine. A secret discussed openly because the woman it concerned wasn't considered capable of understanding. Something inside me shifted. Not cracked. Not shattered. Just shifted. Like a lock turning in a door that hadn't been used in years. Dessert came, a cranberry pie I used to bake myself before Sophie decided her recipe was more refined. I tasted nothing. The voices blurred together, pleasant and distant, and still no one looked at me. Not until the plates were cleared. Daniel finally met my eyes. A brief glance. Almost accidental. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I held his gaze quietly. Steadily. The way you look at a stranger who has forgotten he was once your child. On the drive home, the night air was sharp. The kind that makes every breath feel like a question. I turned off the radio and let the silence sit beside me. His words replayed, not echoing, not tormenting. Just existing. Our last holiday with her. And suddenly, I understood. They had made plans for my life without me. For the first time in years, clarity settled over me, not dramatic, not loud. Just clear. When I closed my front door, the house didn't greet me. Houses used to do that, when someone you loved still lived in them. Now it stayed quiet, like a room holding its breath. I set my gloves on the table and stood there for a moment, letting warmth seep into my fingers. Funny how cold finds its way into places you thought were protected. I hung my coat on the crooked hook Daniel made for me when he was 11. He insisted on hammering the nail himself. It still leaned to the left. I used to love that crookedness. Proof that he tried. Proof that he cared. Tonight, it felt like a reminder. Nothing stays straight forever. Not even the things built with love. The lamp flickered when I turned it on, just like the tree lights earlier. I wondered if that was how life aged, still holding on, but dimmer than before. I sank into the armchair. The cushions were soft from years of being leaned into. My husband spent his last months there, staring out the window as if waiting for something he couldn't name. He used to tell me, "Don't let people rearrange your life without asking." I laughed back then. I thought motherhood meant safety. I thought love guaranteed respect. Tonight proved how wrong I was. I didn't cry. Tears require shock. And I wasn't shocked anymore. The house didn't feel asleep that night. It felt alert, like it was listening. I took off my shoes and pushed them aside with my foot. My legs ached. I'd been standing most of the day, helping Sophie prepare dinner because she said the kitchen overwhelmed her. I've learned over the years that when a younger woman says she's overwhelmed, it often means an older woman is about to carry the weight quietly. I told myself I didn't mind. Back then, it felt like belonging. Now, it felt like service. I made tea I didn't drink and sat by the window instead. Across the street, my neighbor's Christmas lights glowed soft blue against the frost. I used to think nights like this were gentle. That winter had a kindness to it. Tonight, it felt hollow. Daniel's words replayed again, not loud, not sharp. Just steady. Next year will be different. Different how? A smaller room with beige walls and scheduled meals? A polite explanation to friends about how it was for the best? Or simply a holiday table without the inconvenience of an aging mother who no longer fit into carefully curated lives? I wasn't angry. Anger burns. What I felt was heavier. Rounder. Like a stone settling at the bottom of a lake. I finally went to bed sometime after midnight, though sleep never really came. It arrived in thin fragments, like tissue paper tearing too easily. When morning crept in through the curtains, I felt more tired than before. That afternoon, while I was folding laundry at the kitchen table, my phone vibrated. Clara. For a moment, I let it buzz. Not because I didn't want to answer, but because I wasn't sure my voice would hold. When I picked up, she spoke softly, like she was afraid the truth might bruise me. "Grandma, can you talk?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, though my throat felt thick. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, shallow, nervous. She used to breathe like that before school recitals, tapping her fingernail against whatever was closest. "I just wanted to check on you," she said. "Last night felt weird." Weird. Children soften what adults refuse to name. "Yes," I replied gently. "It did." She inhaled sharply. "I heard Dad and Sophie talking before dinner. I wasn't trying to listen. I swear. I was looking for cinnamon." My fingers froze around the towel. "They were talking about January," she continued. "About you moving. About how it has to happen before something goes wrong." I didn't interrupt. I didn't breathe. I just listened. "Dad said he didn't want to tell you yet because you'd make it emotional," she whispered. "He said you'd make it complicated." Complicated. Another word people use when they mean inconvenient. Did they say where? I asked. She hesitated. "Some place called Maple Hills. Assisted living. They said it's adequate. And that you shouldn't live alone anymore." "Not after," her voice trailed off. "After what, darling?" "After Grandpa died." As if grief were a diagnosis. As if widowhood were a warning label. I sat down slowly. "Thank you for telling me, Clara," I said. "You did the right thing." "I didn't mean to spy," she rushed. "It just didn't feel right." They talked like it was already decided. Already decided. That phrase settled into me, not painfully, but firmly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a poorly chosen toast. It was a plan. "Are you upset?" she asked carefully. I thought about lying. About protecting her from the weight of adult betrayal. But something in me refused. "I'm not upset with you," I said. "But they should have talked to me first." "You're not a problem," she said suddenly. "You're not something to fix." Warmth rose in my chest, not relief, not comfort. Recognition. We talked a little longer about school, about an art project she was excited about. Normal things. Anchors. When the call ended, the house didn't feel silent anymore. It felt awake. The next morning, I woke early. Not rested, just alert. Like something had shifted during the night and refused to be ignored. I made tea, buttered toast I didn't eat, and stood in the hallway staring at the closet. That's when I saw the box. A cardboard box on the top shelf. One Daniel had brought over weeks ago. He said it was paperwork he needed to sort through. Asked if I could keep it for a while. You don't mind, do you? I never mind, I'd said. I reached for it now. It wasn't heavy. Just full enough to whisper when I set it down. Inside were folders, neatly color-coded. Blue, green, and one red. Daniel was never this organized. Sophie was. The blue folder held financial statements. My accounts. Notes scribbled in margins. Highlighted figures. Conversations I was never invited into. The green folder held brochures. Smiling Senior. Pastel rooms. Board games. Chair yoga. Maple Hills assisted living. At the bottom, an intake form. My birthday. Medical history. Emergency contacts. None of it written by me. The red folder came last. Printed emails. Polite language. Efficient planning. We will handle the conversation with her. She tends to be emotional. I closed the folder slowly. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives on glossy paper, wrapped in concern. I made stronger tea this time. My hands didn't shake. If they had planned my ending without me, then I would plan differently. Quietly. Carefully. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, I wasn't hurt. I was awake. The decision didn't arrive dramatically. It didn't announce itself. It was simply there when I woke up, solid and calm, like a chair placed beside the bed during the night. I dressed slowly, choosing my heavier coat. At my age, you learn to respect the cold. It doesn't forgive carelessness. The box stayed on the kitchen table where I'd left it. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The truth inside had already settled into my bones. I poured myself a cup of coffee, drank half, and set it down without shaking. Rage makes hands tremble. Fear does too. Clarity does not. Outside, the sky hung pale and undecided, the kind that can't commit to snow or sun. I walked to the bus stop instead of calling for a ride. I wanted the space. Time to let my thoughts arrange themselves without being pushed. There were only 2 other passengers. A young mother with a bundled toddler and an older man who nodded at me, recognizing himself in my posture. I nodded back. It grounded me more than he knew. The bank was warm in a way that felt artificial, like kindness practiced from a manual. The receptionist smiled brightly. Good morning, Mrs. Marsh. How can we help today? I'd forgotten how long-term customers are treated, gently, carefully, like glassware you're afraid might crack. I need to review my accounts, I said. All of them. She blinked, then nodded. Of course. A few minutes later, I was sitting across from a young man named Patrick. Early 30s. Clean cut. The kind of person who assumes older women come in confused. How can I help today? He asked kindly. I'd like to cancel all recurring transfers, I said. Every single one. His eyebrows rose slightly. You have quite a few scheduled. Some have been active for years. Yes, I replied. That's why they need to stop. He hesitated. May I ask if there's been a change in your situation? In a way, I said. Just not the kind you mean. He explained the impact carefully. Loans. Insurance. Tuition. I understand, I said. Cancel them. Immediately. Something shifted in his expression then, not judgment, not concern. Respect. The kind that recognizes resolve. When I signed my name, it flowed easily, as if my hand remembered something my heart had almost forgotten. Outside, the wind had sharpened, but it didn't feel cruel. It felt honest. On the ride home, I watched the town pass by. Places layered with memory. The grocery store where Daniel clung to my coat as a child. The park where Clara learned to ride her bike before her parents decided they were too busy to take her anymore. Nothing hurt the way it might have yesterday. When I stepped into my house, it felt warmer. Lighter. The first sign came that evening. My phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. I ignored it at first. For years, the phone had only rung when someone needed something. Eventually, I looked. 3 missed calls from Daniel. 1 from Sophie. A text from Clara's school. Payment unsuccessful. Please update billing information. I stared at the message. So the bank worked quickly. Another call came in. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. A text followed. Mom, something's wrong. The mortgage didn't go through. Did you switch banks? Mortgage. I remembered the day I wrote that first check. The gratitude in his voice, quick, practiced. Another message. Please call me. This is serious. Serious. Only now. I made tea and let the kettle whistle longer than necessary. The sharp sound cut through the room like clarity. Another message. Sophie. Eleanor, something seems to be wrong with your bank. It's causing issues for us. Always issues. Never us. An hour later, Clara called. Grandma, are you okay?
I'm fine, sweetheart.
Dad's really stressed. They're acting like something terrible happened. Nothing terrible, I said. Just adjustments. She paused. Is this because of what I told you? In a way. She exhaled softly. I just wanted to check on you. That means more than you know. When the call ended, the house felt peaceful. Not lonely. Just mine. At 9 o'clock, another message came. The tuition payment didn't go through. We really need to talk. I stood by the window, watching frost gather along the glass. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like space. Daniel came the next evening. I heard the car door slam harder than necessary. That sound was familiar. When he was a boy, he used to shut doors the same way when things didn't go the way he'd imagined they would. Some habits grow taller, but they don't disappear. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had already gone lukewarm. The knock came sharp and impatient. 3 quick raps, no pause between them. He wanted answers quickly. He always had. I took my time. When I opened the door, he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, phone in one hand, a stack of mail in the other. His face was tight, flushed with frustration, or embarrassment. Maybe both. Mom, he said. We need to talk. He walked straight into the kitchen like the house still belonged to his childhood, like nothing had changed. I followed more slowly and sat back down. Everything bounced, he said, scrolling furiously. The mortgage. Insurance. Clara's tuition. The bank says you cancelled the transfers. I did. He stopped scrolling and stared at me. Why? Because they were no longer appropriate. The silence that followed stretched wide and heavy. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat, exhaling sharply. If you were confused, he said carefully, you should have talked to us first. Confused. That word people use when they don't want to admit resistance. I'm not confused, I said. I made a decision. But we rely on those payments. Yes, I replied. I know. His eyes narrowed slightly, not anger yet. Something closer to disbelief. Is this about Christmas? He asked. The toast? Sophie said it just came out wrong. Did it? I asked softly. Or did it come out honestly? He shifted in his chair. We weren't excluding you. It was a joke. I know about Maple Hills. The words fell quietly between us. His face went still. One slow blink. Then another. You what? The brochures. The intake form. The emails. Color drained from his face. Mom, listen. It's not what you think. You planned my life without me, I said. That's exactly what I think. We were worried, he said quickly. You live alone. You fall asleep on the couch. What if something happens? And when were you planning to tell me? He rubbed his forehead. When things settled. You didn't want a conversation, I said. You wanted agreement. His jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. I let the words sit there untouched. We were trying to help you, he insisted. You're 74. You shouldn't be managing everything alone. And yet, I said calmly, here I am. Managing. He stood abruptly, pacing once before stopping. We just need the transfers reinstated. We're already behind. They will remain cancelled. He stared at me as if he didn't recognize the woman sitting across from him. We're your family.
I'm aware.
Don't you want to support us? I have, I said gently. 4 decades. Support without respect becomes servitude. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I'll call you later, he muttered, already moving toward the door. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I closed the door behind him softly. The house settled into silence, clean and honest. Sophie came the next afternoon. She didn't knock before I opened the door. She blinked, surprised, then recovered quickly. Eleanor, she said, her smile tight. We need to talk. I assumed as much. She walked in with purpose, sat neatly at the table, placed her purse beside her like a prop. I'll be direct, she said. Canceling those transfers caused Daniel a great deal of stress. I'm sorry for the stress, I replied. But the decision stands. You can't just cut us off, she snapped. It's irresponsible. After everything, that word almost made me laugh. I'm not obligated to fund your household, I said calmly. These were shared commitments. Shared implies agreement. I was never asked. She paused, then tried again. You misunderstood Maple Hills. We were only exploring options. You filled out intake forms. We're concerned about your safety, she said. You forget things. What have I forgotten? She hesitated. That's what I thought. She stood abruptly. Daniel won't like this. Daniel, I said, will learn. She left without another word. The house was quiet again. But this time, the quiet belonged to me. Clara came just before sunset. I heard her footsteps on the porch before the knock, lighter than Daniel's, quicker than Sophie's. When I opened the door, she stood there with her backpack still slung over one shoulder, cheeks flushed from the cold. Grandma, she said, breathless. Can I come in? I stepped aside, and she walked straight to the kitchen like she always had, dropping her bag by the chair she favored. She looked around the room as if checking whether something had broken while she wasn't looking. I heard them arguing, she said quietly. About you. I set a cup of tea in front of her, though I knew she wouldn't drink it. Her hands trembled, not from the cold. From confusion. From watching her parents tilt into versions of themselves she didn't yet know how to reconcile. What did they say? I asked. She pressed her palms together. Mom said you're being unreasonable. Dad said you're doing this out of spite. The words didn't sting the way they might have once. They slid past me like rain off glass. And what do you think? I asked. She looked up at me then, really looked. Her eyes were bright and wounded and far older than 16. I think they're scared, she whispered. And when people get scared, they pretend they're in control. I smiled faintly. You're perceptive. She nodded, then hesitated. Are you really okay? I don't care about the money. I care about you. That was the difference. Daniel's concern always arrived tangled in need. Clara's arrived clean. I'm better than I was last week, I said truthfully. She let out a small breath, relief softening her shoulders. I told Mom you weren't being stubborn. I said you were being strong. That was honest, I said. Honesty is never wrong. We talked for a while, about school, about an art contest she wanted to enter, about a friend who had dyed her hair blue and regretted it immediately. Ordinary things. Gentle things. They steadied us both. When she stood to leave, she hugged me tightly, the kind of hug adults forget how to give. I'm on your side, she whispered. I know, darling. After she left, the house felt full instead of empty. The next morning, I walked to a law office on Maple Street. An old brick building that once housed a post office. The bell chimed softly when I stepped inside. I need to revise my will, I said. And secure my finances. The lawyer listened without interrupting. Didn't rush me. Didn't talk down to me. I want no one making decisions for me without my consent, I said. And I want my granddaughter protected. He nodded. That can be arranged. Signing those documents felt different than signing checks had. This wasn't obligation. This was ownership. When I left, the cold felt bracing, not punishing. Daniel returned 2 days later. This time, he knocked softly. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. He looked tired. Older. I didn't realize how much we relied on you, he said finally. You made things easy. I let myself believe that meant you didn't mind. I minded, I said gently. I just stopped saying so. He nodded slowly.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't polished. But it was real. I don't need control, I told him. I need respect. He swallowed. I understand. When he left, the house felt like mine again. That winter loosened slowly. And one evening, as frost lingered on the railings outside, I sat with a cup of tea and realized something quietly astonishing. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for permission. Not for approval. Not for someone else to decide what came next. At 74, I finally understood what my husband had always known. Dignity isn't granted. It's claimed. Quietly. Firmly. Without apology.